Hello everyone, and welcome to Debonair Cyber. My name is Devin, and in today's video we'll be going over the certified machine on the Intro to Red Team track in Hack the Box. This machine has a massive focus on Active Directory once again, and specifically on Active Directory certificate services, which we'll get more into as the video goes on. But this is also the first medium box on the Intro to Red Team track, which I'm really excited to dig into. I hope you are, so let's get into it. Alright, with all that out of the way, I think we are ready to get started here. We have our machine pulled up, certified at 10.10.11.41, and we can see here, this is very important. As is common in Windows Pen Test, you'll start the certified box with credentials for the following account. A lot of people mess this up when they first go into do some of these Windows boxes. They don't pay attention to this machine information and see that you actually have a username and password when you start this machine. It can really trip you up if you miss those credentials before you get started. So normally I would be doing this machine from my own Kali box, but we're going to try something a little bit different today, and we're going to use the Hack the Box Pawn box for a couple of reasons. One, because it's fun to kind of try new things out. I don't have a ton of experience with Parrot, so I want to take it for a test run on this video, but also I was having some pretty catastrophic errors come up in my own VM. So if you have any ideas on what might actually be going on there, or maybe you know a little bit about troubleshooting ADCS and doing stuff like that from Kali VM, hit me up. Maybe we can work together on that. But here we are in the Parrot OS terminal. We can see here that we have some folders because this is like cloud hosted right on Hack the Box stuff, and unfortunately this particular version, the cloud-based one, is only for VIP members, but there are options online if you want to look up how to actually build your very own pawn box that looks and feels exactly like the Hack the Box version. There are tutorials out there for you. Another important thing to note about the Hack the Box pawn box is that basically it shuts the VM completely down. Any data that is not saved within your My Data folder will be deleted every time you exit the pawn box. So if you want to save some notes in there, like you can see here, I have some notes for today's machine, and I have like an nmap script that I like to use that we've used in previous videos on this series that I just kind of like keeping here from when I was doing the research for the video and stuff like that. With all of that being said, we can make a new directory here for certified, and then we can actually copy the nmap script that we have from my data, and I named that nmap script, and we can put that into the certified folder that we just created. And then we can see here that we have that nmap script copied over into our working directory for this machine. Now remember, once again, if you want to actually keep any of this stuff, you need to make this directory inside the My Data folder on the pawn box, which if you're using your own VM, that doesn't really matter. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually go in and edit this nmap script. You can see that I have some placeholders in here, like the IP placeholder, machine name, and then IP once again. We need to actually go in and replace those values with values that reflect this current machine. So we can just use something like nano. It's really easy, nmap script, and then we can go in here, replace this machine IP with 10.10.11.41 in my case, and replace the machine name with certified in this case, and once again put in that IP. And now that we got this here, we can kind of look through this for just a quick second. This is going to save the output of this first nmap command We're doing like a pretty fast scan of all ports on the IP, and then we're going to grep out some of the information from that. Basically, we're just going to take the nothing but the port numbers from that first scan, and that will save those port numbers into a variable called ports that we will then feed into a subsequent nmap scan that will take those ports from the first scan and put them directly into the ports parameter for the second command. And then we're going to do a much more thorough analysis with these SC and SV with the scripts and service detections and all that good stuff. And then we're going to output all of those file types that are possible into files called certified, and then the extensions will be different based on all of those different file types. And then once again, scanning that same IP. So with those edits in place, we can save. Yes, we'll save that there. And then all we have to do is run the script. And this is going to run both of those nmap commands simultaneously. Because this is on the pawn box in particular, we don't have to supply the sudo command. If you're doing this on your own VM, you probably will. It will stop in the middle and ask you for that sudo password if you haven't already entered it in this terminal session. So with all that, I'm going to let this run and we'll be right back. Alright, so it took a few minutes to run here on the pawn box. We got our results back though. We can see here at the top of the nmap scan our results for 10.10.11.41. Port 5388 right here. This Kerberos is a dead giveaway that we are working with some kind of Windows domain controller. Obviously Kerberos authentication is where that's going to be most prevalent. We can also see Windows Active Directory LDAP, definitely going to point toward a domain controller. I want you to pay attention when you see this Active Directory LDAP. You can actually see, first of all, the domain here at certified.htb, and then also we can see the actual fully qualified domain name of the machine itself, dco1 certified.htb. You want to pay attention to both of these things in particular because you will need to, most likely, if we're going to be doing anything with Active Directory, need to reference both the domain and the domain controller itself. These are very important things to note down, and even you'll see in just a minute we will put these into our etc hosts file so that our DNS on a local machine on our parrot instance in this case will actually be able to find those based on their host names instead of strictly by the IP. Some tools are going to require that. As is to be also expected, we see 445 is open here. That's going to be some sort of SMB server. This is also very typical on Windows domain controllers to have that 445 open, especially with our credentials. This would be something that we would want to look into whenever we go start our initial enumeration. If there's anything left open, any kind of files access, any kind of something like that through SMB, we could use a tool like netexec or crackmapexec to go in and actually begin to enumerate that SMB service very easily with our domain account. One last thing to note about this nmap scan that is important is that down here you have these security checks for the SMB service. We can see that message signing is enabled and required, meaning that we wouldn't be able to perform any kind of relay attacks off of this machine. So the very next thing I want for us to do is come in and actually add this fully qualified domain name into our etc hosts file. The way I like to do that is through an echo command. I actually put the IP in first, and then we will put in the dco1.certified.htb that we found in the output earlier, as well as the actual domain itself, certified.htb, and then we will pipe that echo command into the T command using sudo privileges, and we will actually append this with the -a into the etc hosts file. So what you'll see here is that we'll output to our standard out, and then we can tail the etc hosts file and see that we have actually appended that 10.10.11.41 and these fully qualified domain names into the etc hosts file itself. All right, with that out of the way, now we can begin to actually do the fun part. So if you want to actually go in and get some help with the netexec command, again, this is like an updated version of crackmapexec if you've heard of it. You can just call netexec itself on Parrot, and this will run through, especially if you're on your pawn box. This will be the first time that it actually goes through because nothing has been run on this image before. So we can see here this help menu comes up. We have all these different flags, verbose flags, debug flags are important, and then we have all these different services that are available for us to attack with netexec. So it's always good for us to come in and read through these help menus and see what these tools are actually capable of prior to actually trying to work with them. So once again, we have all of these different services that we can run through down here. We know that we want, in this particular case, to go through SMB. So and then we can do netexec smb-h for help once again, and that will bring up this context specific help menu for SMB itself. And you can see a lot more flags in here and a lot more position, a lot more arguments, a lot more things that you can do. I'm sure that's why they don't output all of this into the normal help command and why they put it into these protocol menus specifically. But once again, we'll need to read through this help menu and get all the flags that we need, in this case user, probably domain, those types of things, and put those into the correct flags. So at this point, I hope you've actually gone and read through the SMB help menu so that you can understand a little bit more about what netexec can actually do. It is important for you to learn how to read through this documentation. It is kind of like the bread and butter of learning new tools like this, especially with videos like the one you're watching, right? So we'll come in here, netexec, just like we did before, SMB, and then we want that IP 10.10.11.41. We'll specify the user. We can go back over here again if you've forgotten. Judith Mater. Judith.mater is the username, and then with a password of Judith09. So I like to put these in single quotes just in case there's any kind of special characters going on. Why are we pasting spaces? Password Judith09. And then we can just click maybe shares, something like that. We'll bring up the shares along with the permissions that we have on each of them. And we can see here we have remote admin, the default shares, IPC. So we don't really see anything on here that would look particularly interesting for us. We could go through with a tool into sysvol and attempt to see if there are any kind of like old credentials that are left in here. The Metasploit modules for that to go and scan for that type of thing. In this particular case, I can just go ahead and tell you that's not going to be true, but it is something that you want to get in the habit of checking to make sure with SMB open that what types of shares and permissions you have in that regard. So the very next thing that I'm going to be looking at on a machine like this, knowing that it's a Windows domain controller and that we have valid credentials, is going to be a lot more enumeration on that environment. There's two things in particular that are really kind of like the first thing you want to do in those types of environments. One of them is Bloodhound. This is going to allow us to have access to a GUI interface where we can go in and do some additional analysis on things that are a lot more difficult to do over the command line. Not impossible, and in some cases it's really warranted, but especially when you're talking about getting into this field, Bloodhound is going to be a really solid tool to begin to enumerate Active Directory. So if you're in the pawn box, the first thing that we want to do, we can just actually call Bloodhound itself, and that's going to go through and set up Neo4j for us. This is the backend database that's going to be storing all the data that will be coming into the Bloodhound front end. And they did a really solid job on implementing all of this on the pawn box. Congratulations to y'all. The credentials on the pawn box itself are going to be Neo4j and Neo4j. That will get us logged into Bloodhound in particular. Okay, first thing I like to do is dark mode because flashbang. Alright, so now we have Bloodhound pulled up, but we don't have anything in here yet. We have to actually go and get it. So actually what we can do is just open I like to be a little bit more organized here and do a new tab. Unfortunately in Parrot that creates a smaller one, so we'll just make that a little bit bigger like the first. And then we will need to run our Python ingester for Bloodhound. So on the Pawn box and on Kali, I believe you can just call Bloodhound Python, just like that. Specify your username, password Judith09. Again, you can use single quotes on this. A lot of times I prefer to, if there are special characters, that kind of thing. Getting into the habit of that will keep you from accidentally bumping into commands that don't want to operate correctly. We need to specify the name server itself, the IP 10.10.11.41, the domain certified.htb. Again, we know that from the mmap command earlier, and then we want to run all of those checks that Bloodhound Python can do. All right, and then we'll run this. This is going to run through some checks. We can see that it's finding groups, it's finding GPOs, containers, all of this stuff that is connected to this domain. And we can see here once again inside this certified folder. So what I actually want to do now is come in here and probably just clean some of this up so we can make a new directory for the Bloodhound output. And then we can move everything that is a .json from here. You can see all those groups, OUs, users, all of those types of things into BH output. And look, we cleaned it all up. We can do the exact same thing actually for the nmap stuff as well. So we can do move certified, and we'll do the opposite this time, because we can see that these extensions are actually different, whereas before these were different, but the extension is all the same. So we can move certified anything into nmap, and now we just have a very clean folder structure here that we can work with. So now we'll cd into the Bloodhound output. We have all of these JSON files. We could come in and from Bloodhound itself, from the GUI, and actually just shift click through these. Another cool thing, that just to make you aware of what you can do with this, you can actually zip all of these up. So we will sudo zip. We'll name the output of the zip file first, Bloodhound zip, and then do that .json once again. And we can see all of those get deflated and put into a zip file that now we can come in here and upload this data. Come into Bloodhound output and just click the zip file, and it will automatically come in and pull all of those JSON files in for us instead of us having to go through and click each one. So we'll let that run and then clear the finished. Okay, so now I still don't have anything. You have to come in and search. Okay, we know that we have one user in particular, Judith, and it will probably autocomplete. Judith Mater. So if we come in here, we'll find this node and click on it, and you'll bring up this context menu on the left side. Now, before we go much further, we do want to right click on Judith Mater, and we can set this as owned, mark user as owned. So this is like a starting point. You could set it as starting node as well. Either one works, especially in this particular case. So what we need to do now is let's go through and see what we can find in here. All right, one thing that should be particularly interesting about this Judith Mater user, one thing that stands out should be the outbound object control here. So we can click on this first degree object control and see that our user, Judith Mater, actually is right owner over this management group. Now, this is the first time that we've heard about management group, but I do want to run us through one quick little aside here. So back in our terminal, This is actually going to help us with more enumeration. Very quickly, I do want to make a new directory for LDAP domain dump, and we'll cd into that. LDAP domain dump is a tool that is going to query LDAP for all kinds of different information in the domain itself. This will get us information, basically similar output to what Bloodhound is going to do for us, but in more of like a report style, instead of bringing all that into a database that we then have like GUI access to, if that makes sense. So once again, I hope you take the time to come through and read through this help menu. We can specify username, password, obviously, and then DNS server, just like we did with the other one, host names, which we can use because we put them in the etc hosts file, those types of things. So once again, come through, read through this. It really is important for each tool that you know how it works, what the things that it can do, the things that it can't do, all that. All right, so in this case, we're going to use LDAP domain dump. We're going to specify the user. In this case, we are putting the domain first, certified. We're using a double backslash here because we have to escape the original, the first one. I was putting our username in and then the password for that account. We're outputting these files to the name certified, and then using the host name to actually call where we want this LDAP domain dump to target. So we'll let this run. It's very quick, and we once again can see, oh, this actually puts it into a folder for you. That's nice. So we can actually look at these files, and here we can see we have these domain computers.html, meaning that we can open these with a browser. Something like Firefox in this case is already installed. We know for sure if you have like Chrome or whatever on your own VM, whatever browser you want to open them into. But the one that we want to do in this case, probably the most effective, is going to be domain users and probably domain groups. If you prefer to search through these with JSON, you can do that too. That's really the beauty of the output of this tool, that it puts all this information into all kinds of different formats. So really it is as simple here as calling Firefox, and we can do domain users.html, and that will open that file in Firefox for us to view. This one has dark mode already installed, thankfully, but here we can actually see all of the user accounts that are present in the domain that LDAP domain dump actually pulled for us. So we see these other Gregory Cameron, Harry Wilson, Alexander Hughes, and then our very own Judith Mader user, all users on this box. So we have these two other interesting accounts here. One is management service, that looks to be some kind of service account, and then we have operator CA, or CA operator is the same name for that one. These are very interesting to us. And then KRB TGT guest and administrator are all standard domain accounts within any Active Directory environment. Really, anytime you're dealing with Active Directory, it's a good idea to know what users are present on the system and what specific permissions they might have. Here we can see the primary groups that these are in. We can see their different group membership, and here we can actually see management is the group that they are actually a part of, as well as remote management, meaning that they would be able to remote into a machine. So these are also interesting for us. So we can click on that, and it will actually take us over to a different file that we have, users by group. We can see that there is one user in this management group, and because of Bloodhound, we know that Judith is actually a right owner over the management group. That should really get your wheels turning. So now that we actually know what we're targeting, now we get to do an even more fun part, the actual exploitation of the things that we have found in the environment, right? So in Bloodhound, they have a really cool feature. You can actually right click and click on help, and this will actually give you some more information about what this is actually telling you, and then you can actually get some information on how to exploit it from from a Windows perspective or from a Linux perspective. They do point out a handful of tools in here: NetRPC, DACL, Edit. Those are perfectly fine for you to use. And they even go through a little bit of syntax on those, so maybe worth doing this machine a little bit differently than what I do. I am going to use a different tool from what they recommend here in the Linux abuse section, however. But I did think it was very important for us to go through how to actually enumerate this Active Directory environment from from point A to all the way down to where we are now, right? So we checked over SMB. We used our credentials to go through and do some Bloodhound enumeration, and then we also did an LDAP domain dump and grabbed all of those users, all of the groups. So now we have a lot of information at our disposal at this point in the engagement. It makes moving forward from here much easier because we have, once again, we know all the different users that are present on the machine. We know which ones that kind of stand out to us, and we can begin to, especially with the Bloodhound output, begin to put some attack paths together moving forward. From here, I want for us to go into back into our terminal. This one does have our Firefox running. If you don't care about it, you can close that. I am going to open a new tab just in case we need that one again. Make this one bigger, and then we'll cd back out of here. Couple back. So we're back in our working directory for this machine, right? Okay. The tool that I want for us to use in this walkthrough is called Bloody AD. And if you're interested in this particular tool, you can come in here on Firefox and do a quick Google search for Bloody AD and find this GitHub that is dedicated to Bloody AD, and you can see it's actually been moved to its own repo. But this actually gives you a little bit of documentation about what this tool does, what it can do, and if we go over to the wiki, we can find some installation instructions, which is great. So we're just going to follow these here. And on Parrot OS, it really is just as simple as saying pip install Bloody AD. And that will go through and do all those configurations for us. And now we should be able to just call the tool itself. If you're on Kali, I know that Bloody AD is actually part of the standard Kali image. You should be able to get it with apt or apt-get, whichever package manager makes more sense for you. So similar to netexec, we see that from this help output here that we have some, once again, some context stuff that we can dig through: add, get, remove, set. I would encourage you to go through the GitHub documentation over here and actually, once again, you'll notice a theme here, begin to read through the documentation and see what these tools can actually do, especially if there's something that you're not really familiar with. This is going to be a very common theme in cybersecurity in general. Learning how to read documentation efficiently will help you very much in the long run. The more you practice now, the easier it's going to be when you have to do it in the field. Alright, so now that we have Bloody AD installed, what is it that we actually need to do with it? This is where the output of that Bloodhound attack path actually helps us out a lot. So we can actually begin to change the ownership. So basically, this Linux abuse tab is going through the process of giving Judith not only ownership of the management group, but also the rights that we need to eventually put ourselves into the group. And to make this process a little bit easier to actually read, I've typed out the Bloody AD commands here. So we can see that we need to actually set the owner of the management group to us, and then we'll add generic all privileges instead of just right owner. This is kind of so for this in particular, you'll have to dig a little bit further into Windows privileges and how those actually work. Generic all is just going to give us, like, basically we own the management group at that point. This is saying set owner, but that doesn't really give us any kind of privileges over that group. It's just saying, hey, they are the owner. They don't necessarily have privileges over it, but this second command, adding the generic all of the management group to Judith Mater, will give us right over anything within that group. And then we will add ourselves as a group member to the management group. So once again, why would we actually go through this? Well, we can once again go back to our enumeration here and see that the management service account is within the management group. So now what we want to do is look up the management service account, and we can actually right click and say shortest path to here from owned. So this will set up a fun graph for us to kind of look through here. Make this a little bit easier for us to read. So we can see that we have right owner. We already knew this. We knew this path here. But the next step is from management into the management group, into management service account. We can see that this generic right exists, and then once again we can right click and get the help context for Linux abuse if we want. We can also read through this info section here. There's a couple of different ways that we could go about this. Do a Kerberos attack. If you know how to do Kerberosing, that would be a really fun technique to try. Even from the moment that we knew that there was a service account, it would have been possible for us to attempt a Kerberos attack. In this particular case, however, we could try a shadow credentials attack, and they list a tool here called PyWhisker. I am once again going to deviate from that, but once again, learn how to use this, play around with PyWhisker, those types of things too. Knowing how to do the same thing in multiple different ways is an asset, to say the least. In this particular case, though, I want to use a different tool called Certify. But before we do that, we do actually need to go through and execute these commands. There is, now that we've made it to this point and done this part of the walkthrough, right, there is a cleanup script on the machine. So if you've done these already and you're not successful on the next steps, you will need to go back and redo these 3 commands here. It's a good idea to do exactly what I've done and put this chain into like some other text file so that we can kind of maintain access up to a certain point. So we'll copy these 3 commands, and we can just honestly paste all 3 of them in at the same time and watch it work. We can see that we changed the old owner. It's now replaced by Judith Mater. We can see that we added ourselves generic all privileges over management, and then we added ourselves to that management group. Now, the last step in this attack chain is for us to actually use Certify to carry out this shadow credentials attack that they were talking about before. So once again, we have this help menu for Certify, and there is also a contextual menu aspect to this as well. So we can see here that we can abuse shadow credentials for account takeover, and we can do Certify shadow help, and this will bring up that context specific for Certify shadow for us to read through and understand what types of positional arguments we need. In this particular case, I am going to be using auto for this attack. Alright, so with this fully typed out, we can see Certify shadow, like we pointed out before, auto. We specify the DC IP 10.10.11.41, the user, with the domain attached. I think that's important in Certify. Judith09 is a password, and the account that we are targeting for this is the management service account. So before that cleanup script runs, we'll let this go. And spoilers, this is going to fail. We can see here that we get an error while trying to request a target or ticket granting ticket from Kerberos. If you want, you can do some more research on how Kerberos authentication actually works. That's a little bit outside of the scope of this video, I guess. But essentially, in order for us to actually get this ticket granting ticket, we need to sync our clock with the domain controller. We can use a tool called NTP date. We can see the help menu here, NTP date, and we can actually just specify that IP. And we can see, so once again, in this particular case, you have to actually read through the file. We can see here that read through the help file. We can see here that the B command is, force time, the lowercase b, is to force the time step. So where it was telling us, hey, that's not permitted, actually, we do want to actually do that. So that is how we perform it, and come back in here and once again attempt to get some shadow credentials for this account. And we can see this time that we got the ticket granting ticket, that it's going to save the credential cache into management.ccache, and that we also get the NT hash for the management service account. So both of these things, first of all, we can ls and see that we have that ccache file here. We can actually save that into a variable, a specific variable, krb5cc name. I'll type that out in just a second. But essentially, that's going to allow us to authenticate to the domain using Kerberos moving forward, or we could use a pass the hash attack and pass that NT hash over to the Windows server for authentication. So if we export krb5cc name and then specify that file management service.ccache, we can actually use that as Kerberos authentication, again, moving forward. In this particular case, though, we know that the management service account has remote management, is in the remote users group. So we should be able to use a tool like maybe like EvilWinRM or something like this to get a shell on the machine. So in this particular case, I'm going to use EvilWinRM, specify the IP, the user, and the hash. You see that we don't even need to know what the password is for the management service account. As long as we have this hash available, this will get us logged in, and we can see that we are so here we can see that we are actually the management service account on certified, and we can pull up this privilege information as part of our kind of initial enumeration as well. So from here, we can actually just use PowerShell commands, cd back out and over to desktop, and find your user.txt file. All right, so now from here, we do have our user flag and we own a different account. We've made some lateral movement. Now it's time for us to go for the privilege escalation on this box, to go from the management service into the administrator account. I'm actually going to exit out of this shell just to prove, hey, you don't need to know the password, and you don't really have to go and enumerate on that machine in particular. Sometimes it can be a little bit more lucrative to not do any of that. What I actually want to do to help us move forward is the same thing that we did to begin with. Move over to this management service account, look at the node information, and once again we can see in the outbound object control that we have first degree object control over something. And in this case, it is the generic all privileges, like we gave ourselves over the management group to give us all the privileges and everything, over the CA operator user account. This is interesting. In this case, it can be fair for us to kind of make an assumption, knowing that we're on a Windows domain controller, that CA will stand for certificate authority. And this will in turn, as I talked about earlier in the video, point us over to Active Directory certificate services, meaning that there are certificate templates that can be used to authenticate to the network, and that this user account would be the one that would oversee that process basically. So knowing that we have generic all over the CA operator account means that we can go in and actually just change the password of that account and own it, which Bloodhound also points out for us using the NetRPC. Fun fact, Bloody AD, if you read through the documentation earlier, will be able to do this exact same thing for us. You could also use the shadow credentials attack here once again, but I like showing the versatility of tools sometimes. So once again, we'll come into Bloody AD and we'll use it to set the owner of the CA operator account to this management service account, which we now own. And then we will reset the password of the CA operator account to something super secure like password 123 exclamation point. So we can copy both of these commands, and then we can see that we changed this password successfully. All right. So now we're going to be using Certify to actually enumerate the environment for these vulnerable CA certificates templates. So Certify find this time, not shadow or anything like that. We're going to use the CA operator with the password that we just put in, specify DCIP, and we want for this one to go to the standard output. Normally this would write to a file, but we're fine with just outputting straight to the terminal this time, and we want to enumerate the vulnerable tickets. And we can see as it's running that it's going to be pulling the CA configuration. We need to scroll back up through this, and we can see here that the CA name, Certified DC01CA, is going to be important for later. We can copy this down and put it over into this notes file that we're kind of putting together. We will need that. We can see once again the DNS name. We can see kind of the structure of this certificate subject, and it looks like we have found a vulnerable certificate template here, certified authentication. We can see that the enrollment rights include the operator CA, and that this is vulnerable to ESC9. So if you're not familiar with ADCS, I would highly recommend going and actually reading the white paper on the subject. This is a file from Spectre Ops called Certified Pre-Owned, Abusing Active Directory Certificate Services. This is like the authority on ADCS and how these vulnerabilities exist, what to do about them if they exist in your environment, how to exploit them, everything. And since this paper has come out, there's been a handful of other escalations that have come through, and some of these have actually been completely patched out by Windows. So all that being said, it's highly educational to go through and read that if you're not familiar with ADCS. More and more machines I've seen lately on Hack the Box are including ADCS as an attack path. It seems like people are really starting to become more aware of these paths. But for now, we can go and just work off of this ESC9. So I did actually find this really nice write-up from a user, Red Bucket, on Medium that has the ESC9 escalation, has the requirements, has the actual exploitation, all the way from finding users to verifying the permissions you have over those users, changing user accounts, all that good stuff. So if you want to go through that one, go ahead. For here, though, essentially what we need to do is change the enrollment that we're going to use on that template to the administrator account. This is going to basically tell the CA, tell the certificate authority that, hey, we're requesting an authentication template, this certified authentication template specifically, as the administrator account. And basically the CA is going to trust, hey, you're requesting it for the administrator account, you must be the administrator password or the administrator user. It does not actually perform those checks on the back end. So we're going to change our UPN using a tool like Certify to the administrator. And that command is going to look like this. We have certify account update. We're going to use the management service account to perform this because, again, we have that hash and we don't even need to know the password. And the user that we're targeting is the CA operator account. And we're once again changing that UPN over to administrator. Let that run, and then we can see that we successfully updated that account. Now we actually need to request the template for that administrator account, and that looks like this. We're going to request as the CA operator, which we know has enrollment access because we looked at it up here earlier, and specify DC. The target, this is where you need that actual, this is where you need to put the actual host name, the fully qualified domain name, right? The CA itself that we noted down earlier, certified DC01CA, and the template that you are requesting, as well as the UPN once again. So we can actually see here that I did actually run that command twice. The first time it fails, literally just pressed the up arrow on the keyboard and hit it again immediately, and it actually went through. For some reason, sometimes that does not work on the first try. Just keep trying. This will actually save a certificate and the private key to administrator.pfx. From here, before we move any further, we actually do need to reset our UPN because Windows is going to look at us a little bit crazy if our username and our UPN look different when we go to actually authenticate with the administrator PFX that we have currently. So once again, we're going to do the exact same command that we started out with, but kind of in reverse. So we're going to once again use the management service account with the hash and set the CA operator UPN back to CA operator. And we can see that we successfully update there. Now we can take that PFX file and pass it back to the certificate authority, once again with certify, and we're going to use the auth command this time. Give it that PFX that has the saved certificate and the private key, and then pass that over to the domain with certify, and we can see that it will go and grab a ticket granting ticket. Once again, if your clock skew for some reason got reset, you will need to run the ntp date command and reset back to sync with the domain controller. In this case, I didn't need to do that, but now we can see finally we have the hash for the administrator at certified.htb account. We have the full NTLM hash here. And finally, we can come in with eval_nrm using that NT hash, NT meaning the second part of the hash if you're not familiar, and use eval_nrm to actually log into the machine and go to the administrator desktop. Whoops. And grab your root.txt. And with all of that, I think that's going to bring today's video to a close. I really enjoy this machine a lot. It does a very good job of showcasing the kind of an entry level, I would say, as entry level as you can get for showcasing the vulnerabilities that are actually baked into Active Directory certificate services if they are not reconfigured in your environment. This Active Directory is very, very vulnerable straight out of the box. And like I said earlier, ADCS in particular is becoming more and more popular among attackers, among just kind of front of mind in the security community right now. So understanding how the public key infrastructure on Active Directory works, how you can exploit it is an excellent asset to anyone really, whether you're defending, whether you're attacking. Knowing about these vulnerabilities and having the ability to exploit them will come in handy one day. If you made it this far into the video, please like and subscribe. It does a great job of kind of signaling to me that y'all are getting the value that you feel like you need. And if you didn't get that value, please let me know in the comments, and I'll do everything I can to improve in the future. With all that, though, we'll see you next time.